Okay, now starting part two about this poem of yours, where my role, so to speak, in it is as one that ignores that milk arrives by hand carried people and labor, and that it just magically appears. So, but on my point about needing infrastructure, pray tell, what butcher shop is not built on a road? What butcher shop ever was not built on a road? Okay, so which one of these businesses you're using as an example doesn't need to be built on a road? Okay, that's my question. Also, in that poem, it talks about instant justice and safety, and it talks about the government that doesn't really provide that. Well, no one can claim to be able to provide those. Not in theory, not in actuality. Okay, we're in the more reasonable position of figuring out how to optimize our situation, how to increase our safety, how to have a system where everything reasonable can be tried and tested for its effect. Okay. Now, yeah, markets are a slow mechanism. Only your faith says otherwise. Markets are fairly slow mechanisms. You talk about how quick people jump in. Listen, yeah, after somebody proves there's a success, a ton of copycats will jump in. Okay. No, the first creation of the iPod, no, there was there's all these different kinds of devices, and would they play music, and what would their primary purpose be? And that was the era for the engineers to try to figure out how to make a bridge that would work. When they figured that out, yeah, lots of people jump in. It's like if we built this road we're talking about and it was a super big success, you probably have private industry trying to make other roads because they're copiers. And that's the only time they start to jump in fast. And even then, they only jump in fast. They don't solve the problem fast. They jump in with a lot of failed guesses. Okay, a lot of guesses that failed. Efficiency is not the market's strong suit. Creativity is. Creativity. Engineering, the strong suit. Building a bridge that works first time. Okay, market, not so good with the first time try, but it is good at trying again and again and again. Okay. When a market starts to mature and you have a lot of regulation, then you can put the market to work on efficiency and making it cheaper and cheaper. But again, that's at the point that you have a lot of the standardization that comes in with the development of a commodity market of some kind. You point out that you say that there's no such thing as the will of the people. I think there is, though I agree with you, because there's no singular will, but there's a complex will. And it's a complex will of millions. There's some internal patterns. There's means of deciding things like democratic means, among the hundreds of millions in the U.S. Unanimity will never work in any group, okay? Because, yeah, you could have unanimous consent to join the group. So everybody in the group had to say, yes, I'm a part of the group, and I would agree. But once you're in there sharing the property of that group, you're not going to unanimously decide on everything that you do with that property. You're going to need a mechanism like democracy. You're going to have to be mature and realize you're not always going to get your way. Or what? No, it's supposed to be unanimous, and as soon as you don't like the way things are going, you just take your ball and go home. You think that's going to work out? The idea that you would think that the markets are great, and the evidence is how a market distributes resources in a crisis. There's food rotting. There's food crises right now. There's food rotting while people starve. And you want to call that efficient? See, that's faith. That's where whatever the market decides, we're going to call that efficient, and whoever starves, we're going to call that just the way it goes. And, an engineer studying this problem of distributing food would consider the people starving to be an inefficiency. That does not prove the efficiency of the market. Okay. So I'm curious, do you believe in profiteering? So like a crisis, during Katrina. Say somebody charges you $100 for a bottle of water. Okay, because that's a going rate. And say they have 5,000 gallons of water. It's just that nobody else has any. Okay. So there's this local resource crisis. And so that's fine. You need a bottle of water. They're the ones that happen to have water. So $100 a bottle is the fair price. Or is there a distinction? Okay. Well, if there is a distinction, in that situation, then the distinction is how fluid the market is. Okay. If water was still coming and going freely into that area and it costs $500 because that's really how much it costs to get it there, then that would be one thing, right? But if it's $1.50 20 miles away, and the person is just exploiting this local infrastructure failure, that's another matter. Why? Because questions of property relate directly to questions of common infrastructure. Okay? They relate directly to the availability of infrastructure. If infrastructure is available reliably in general, then the rules of property, as we like to think of them, pertain more aptly. But if it's not, the rules of property fail. It's like the landlocking situation. If I'm on my property and somebody owns all my property around me and they decide to do some profiteering, they say, oh, look, this guy can't get food for his family unless he pays me. So it's worth his whole survival. I'll charge him, $1,000 toll on this road, and you better do a big shopping trip because it'll be $1,000 next time too. I would have every right just to, as far as I'm concerned, just to ignore that, break that property right, and come and go from my property as I see fit. And the purpose of the government is to avoid violent conflicts like that. By securing my rights to pass freely, but the government says, well, we'll acknowledge your right to have this monopoly on this property, that it's your property, but you're going to have to let people come and go freely. And if their property's on the other side, there's going to have to be a road along your property line or right through the middle of your property if that's what it takes. And this avoids violent conflict. So I don't have to fight. When property rights break down and somebody's trying to profiteer on me and I'm going to violate that, we're going to try to avoid that by having some rules so that they can't do this sort of profiteering. And then we have some consistency in what the basic infrastructure people can rely on, like the right to egress and whatnot. And and then also it allows you to deal with the borderline cases where you can't quite solve them right, but at least you solve them consistently. Hopefully fairly, but at least consistently. And again, you went on again about showing the calculations are simple, but that was actually silly worblux, because obviously the input doesn't matter. It's easy to do division if it's difficult to get the numbers that you have to divide. So okay, the basic summary is that the market brings in creativity. If you don't know what to do, you don't know what product you need, or you need a lot of improvement in the products that you have in the particular area. You want faster and faster. Computers are changing really quickly. You wouldn't want to standardize based on a 286 infrastructure that everybody needs a 286. Things are changing quick enough. And that's where you need market, when you need this creativity. And really, you want to spend the money of trying and trying again because you don't really know what's right. Engineering, on the other hand, is good for when, okay, we might build better bridges in the future, but we know how to build a bridge right now. We don't have to just try it and see if it works out. We can build a bridge that will support the kind of vehicles by design that are going to drive on it. Okay, now, so as these things start, when they start to become like infrastructure, you start to regulate with some care. So, for example, maybe letting new entries in an industry plug into the common infrastructure. So if there's a private phone network, you don't have to nationalize that. You can just make it so that, okay, small entrepreneurs are allowed to plug into that network. After hundreds of years of experience with something like a water service, it might be heavily regulated enough that, in some cases the government provides it, in other cases a highly governmental style private organization does, following the regulations carefully, and that's what you have. So you do have private water companies, but they act a lot like a public utility. Okay, and then we have something like police, which is better put entirely in the hands of the state, where it can be more than just regulated. We don't need to employ a lot of creativity. We need it to be reliable. We need it to be fair, and so we need it to be reliable. We don't need to be super creative, and we are not concerned about letting private people take the blame for the mistakes of the police. Mistakes of the police are problems of society, so we are just going to keep that responsibility in the hands of the common infrastructure, where it is ultimately, both directly and indirectly, accountable to the people. So, cheers.